Welcome back to the Messy Reformation. My name's Jason Rice. I'm the lead pastor at Faith Community CRC in Beaver Dam, Wisconsin. My co-host is Willie Cronky. He's a member at Pease CRC in Pease, Minnesota. We're just a couple of guys who love the Christian Reformed Church and want to see Reformation happen in our denomination. But we realize that whenever Reformation happens in the history of the church, things get messy. And after this past synod, things are continually getting messier and messier in the Christian Reformed Church. So we're taking the opportunity to have conversations with pastors throughout the Christian Reformed Church to find out what's going on in our denomination, but also to talk about what Reformation might look like. If you haven't already, take a moment, click subscribe so you don't miss any of our upcoming content. We are dropping episodes every single Sunday evening. We also want to continue to say thanks to everyone who sponsored us on Patreon. We're slowly making our way toward our goal of 20 sponsors at $5 a month. If you appreciate what we're doing and want to help us continue to put out content, head on over to patreon.com/themessyreformation. You can also support us for free by sharing our content. I'm a terrible self-marketer and need your help. If you know of anyone who would benefit from listening to this content, let them know about the Messy Reformation. Also, let them know about our newest announcement, the Hall of Tyrannus. We're really excited about this new opportunity to disciple reformers for the CRCNA. If you'd like more information on this, head on over to themessyreformation.com and look for the Hall of Tyrannus. With all that said, we're going to get to this week's episode, which is part 1 of our conversation with Jesse Walhof. So, Jesse, why don't you just kick us off by telling us a little bit about yourself and your family and the church that you're at?
Yeah, so my name is Jesse Walhof. I'm pastor at Living Water Community Church over in Sheldon, Iowa. Been here about 6.5 years now. We have 2 campuses, one in Orange City, one in Sheldon. About 250 members between the two, about 600 people attending between the 2 campuses, give or take. As far as family, I have the best of both worlds in that I have awesome parents and an awesome sister and brother-in-law and nephew, but I'm not married. So I'm a single guy serving in ministry, which most people think would be quite the chore. I love it. I think it's great. I love being single, love being in ministry, and it offers me a lot of time to do what I need to do in terms of serving the Lord and serving the church. So not much by way of family other than hi, mom and dad and sister and brother-in-law. So
yeah, awesome. So tell us a little bit about your call to ministry. When did you come into the ministry, or when did you kind of know God was calling you into the ministry?
Yeah, so my call to ministry actually sort of began basically the exact same time I became a Christian. And, I got a pretty long and weird story involving all kinds of partying, getting kicked out of college and various other things. Shout out Dordt University. And it was after a Bible study one night, an alternative Bible study. And I was walking around probably, literally because the Bible study was based on Fight Club. I think I got smashed in the nose a couple of times that night. And I was drinking a few beers, walking around, and opened to 1 Peter 5:7, says, cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you. And at that point, I felt something in my soul say, now you know what I feel for you and what you must tell people the rest of your life. And at that point, gave up the partying, graduated Dordt, but my call to pastoral ministry didn't really start until about 7 years later. I was running from it for 7 years, which of course brought me to Alaska to work with homeless kids, and then Chicago for a while, and then into homelessness for a bit. And, and then at one point I just called up my dad and I said, I think God's telling me to go to seminary. And he said, well, it's about time. I've been waiting. And in 2013, I enrolled in Sioux Falls Seminary. And I spent a couple years there, and it was great. Got my degree and did my time over at Calvin Theological Seminary for the MDiv program, and was a candidate in 2015. So kind of an alternative route more than most people, I think. So
yeah, well, that's awesome. One of the things that I thought was funny, because I had a similar experience when I felt my call to ministry, I was like, man, I never saw that coming. I never in a million years thought that was coming. And other people were like, oh yeah, we saw that coming.
Yeah.
It's like, how?
Yeah.
I never in a million years thought I would be a pastor.
Yeah, and it's funny because, like, whether it be your situation or my dad, it's like, why didn't you guys say anything years ago? And in my case, they're like, we tried, you just wouldn't listen. Oh yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, you were just as stubborn and
yeah, just a stubborn kid going, I know what the world is, having no idea what the future held at all, you know. So no, it's been good. I'm glad to be called to this role and be called to the church that I'm at. It's been a pleasure to serve in this capacity.
Yeah. So you went straight out of seminary then into your current call, I assume?
So that's also kind of a bit alternative route too. I was a candidate in 2014/2015. And then I actually needed, I believe, a couple hours, because at that time during the MDiv program, you had to have so many hours of practical ministry. And one of my professors said, look, you're good at outreach. You've been working with VOA all through seminary and running the nonprofit wing of the seminary. Why don't you come work for me as an outreach pastor over in Marion, South Dakota? There's a town of Dalton, South Dakota, which has like 39 people, 37 of which are homeless, and we want to reach out to that population. And so I said, sure, let's do it. And he was actually the lead pastor at a small Mennonite church called Evangelical Mennonite Brethren over in Marion, South Dakota, a little country church. And those people just embraced me and loved me to death. And so my first year and a half was actually as an outreach pastor in a Mennonite congregation to a small town in South Dakota. And then, the full-time call came in with Living Water, and been here since 2016. So, yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have a lot of alternative routes here coming into ministry. That's awesome.
Yeah, a bit a little different than most, I would assume. So
now, did you grow up in the CRC? You said you went to Dort. So are you like a CRC boy, kind of born and raised, or did you come into Dort from a different direction as well?
No, I was always CRC. I was baptized actually at Shalom CRC over in Sioux Falls. And I've been CRC my entire life. Now, granted, when you're in college and the Mennonite experience and, in my various travels to Alaska and Chicago and various other places, you attend different churches, whether they be RCA or, Presbyterian or whatever. But at my core, I've always been Christian Reformed and knew very well that pastor or not, that's where I was going to land. As I tell my family, my grandpa was one of the founders of his church up in Edgerton, Minnesota.
Okay.
Cool. I was born CRC, I'll live CRC, and as long as there's a CRC to serve, I'll probably die CRC. So,
Amen.
Yep, that's kind of where aside from Jesus Christ, that is where my allegiance lies.
Yeah. So on that note, then I'd just love to hear your thoughts then on kind of, if you've kind of been connected to the CRC your whole life. What's your thoughts on kind of the trajectory the CRC has been going since, when you were younger and in the church, and then kind of to where we are now? Yeah,
I think, it's weird because there's small little subsets of the CRC within the CRC, right? You have one subset, it seems, over in Grand Rapids. You have another subset kind of over in the Midwest, and you have another subset over in California. And it's interesting because they all have their little different pockets of culture. And so being primarily in the Midwest specifically, or if Grand Rapids is the Mecca, so to speak, Orange City and Peller, the Medina, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Growing up around that, you definitely get a vibe for what is happening in the CRC versus what you want to happen in the CRC. Right. And what is happening, or what has happened, especially since 92, 93, 94, 95, 96, has been very much this overwhelming sense of we must stick with our tradition. We must stick with our creeds and confessions. We must stick with our scripture in spite of the things that are taking place that threaten to steer us away from all those things. And so when we talk about the CRC and its trajectory, I almost view it as two different things. It's where we have been and where people would like us to be, right? Where we have been has been very tumultuous. We all know about the women in office thing in 1996. We all know that, you know, that our relationship with the RCA took very much permanence there for a while. We all know about the tension in 2016 leading up to the HSR in 2022. So it's been very like up and down, trying to find our identity, it seems. Whereas we in the Midwest, and me, myself, I'm like, I know exactly what the CRC is. It's us. It's the people who are conservative, who believe very much in the confessions, in the creeds, who are very much orthodox in our belief system. So that's a long and short way of saying, how have I seen the trajectory of the CRC? It's gone through many changes in terms of practicality, but in terms of our belief, where I currently am stationed, it hasn't changed at all.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's right. That's actually one of the things that I've told people quite a bit, that I think actually, and it's not just because I'm a Midwest guy as well, because on this podcast, we're interviewing pastors from all over the place, from California and Canada and, you know, Southern United States, all over Texas.
Yeah.
And we all seem to have pretty similar ideas on who we are as a Christian Reformed church. I think actually the vast majority, right? And Willie and I have been telling everybody for a long time, even leading up to this past synod, that like we think probably 75% of the Christian Reformed church is kind of conservative and confessional and is in an agreement and alignment on this issue. But there's this 25% that is really having this kind of identity. I think they'll be angry, but I think they're having an identity crisis on who are we as the CRC, and they're trying to figure that out and change. And we're saying our identity is found, yes, in Christ, but as a denomination, it's found in these three forms of unity, because this is what we've covenanted around. We've said, this is who we are as a people. We're not trying to weasel in and out of those things.
No, you're exactly right. And it's interesting because when it comes to the identity of the CRC, I'm often left wondering, who changed? I didn't change. None of the churches that I know changed. None of the pastors around me changed. Nothing changed. So what changed that all of a sudden the CRC seems to think that it needs a new sense of who it is? Yeah. Where did that come from? And I've been racking my brain for probably the last 6 years, because we all saw the HSR coming. We all knew what was going to transpire. We see the culture around us. We see our RCA brethren going through the devastation that is unfortunately hitting their denomination. Mm-hmm. Yep. And I'm racking my brain for the last 6 years, sitting there thinking, if we didn't change, what was the reality that was instituted upon that 25-30% that all of a sudden a new revelation needs to happen in spite of 160 years of history, in spite of 2,000 years of tradition, in spite of 6,000 years of biblical truth? Where did this new revelation come from that all of a sudden in the last half decade, now we need to switch? I do not understand it.
Yeah, it's kind of confusing to me as well. And, you were at Synod 2022 as well. That's where we met. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that really jumped out at me was there were different definitions of what it means to be reformed. Yeah. And so like many of the progressives, whatever you want to call them, were saying like, you guys aren't being reformed. You conservatives, you just are like, you want to be Baptists, or they were accusing us of being Baptists and fundamentalists and all of this. And I'm like, all we're trying to say is we should believe our confessions that are reformed, that are the Christian Reformed confessions. I'm really confused by that.
At what point did the confessions become something that was malleable? At what point did they become movable? At what point did they become almost not covenantal? Right? Because if that's the case, I mean, let's just name that and move forward in whatever trajectories we need to move. But if their argument is, being reformed means always reforming, you're absolutely right. We always need to be reforming in terms of how we do ministry. we don't need to be reforming in terms of reforming it into something that's not biblical. Mm-hmm. That's not reformed at all. And that's my main problem with it. It's always be reforming does not mean that we go contrary to the creeds, confessions, and scriptures. So, yeah, that's just one of my primary concerns right now with the trajectory of the CRC.
Yeah. And so you said you've been kind of racking your brain for the last 6 years on like how that happened. Mm-hmm. Do you have thoughts on how that happened, on how this kind of portion of the CRC kind of wandered off?
I think one of the big things that we as an institution, as a tradition, as a culture, as a denomination, whatever noun you want to use, one of the big things that we have failed upon, especially since probably the late 1950s, is the fear of planting our flag firmly in the ground and saying, this is what we believe on a specific issue, right? Mm-hmm. I think it's a pendulum swing, as is per every culture and in every institution, where you're founded in, the CRC history splitting off the RCA, you're founded in complete orthodoxy, so much so that when it comes to Freemasonry, you say to the RCA, you guys aren't firm enough against it, right? And then you kind of take a pendulum swing. And then in the 1950s, it swings back. And then you have situations about dancing and, you can't play cards and various other things. And then the 70s and 80s, it's almost like the pendulum swung the other way. And we said, those were really divisive things that we did. Let's really leave what almost we believe up to the individual churches, because we can't take such a hard stance on this stuff. We're getting too legalistic. And so the pendulum swung all the way to the point that when things, regardless of where you stand on women in office, but when things like women in office came up in 95, 96, a little bit earlier, all the way launching back to the 1970s, it wasn't the CRC taking a stance and saying, this is what we all believe. Our stance was, it's up for you guys to decide. And when you instill a culture that basically says, we're going to leave it up to you to decide, both things are okay, we can live in tension with one another, you're inviting in that culture for the near future. And I'm not saying that the HSR and the question of human sexuality is that much of a problem in terms of relating it to women in office. But what I am saying is we refuse to take a firm stance on a lot of things. And so when it came to this stance and we had to take a firm stance, we've allowed ourselves to drift into anything's acceptable. Yeah. And that's a problem.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And Jesse, I'm just wondering what we're using here is kind of the slippery slope argument and how it's kind of reared its ugly head from 20 to 25 years ago into the fruition of what we're seeing now. Mm-hmm. That's kind of what you're saying is if you compromise here and you don't take a firm stance, you open yourself up to the potentiality of even worse theological problematics further on down the road, which is where we're at now. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I think one of the biggest failings that the CRC has had in the last 25, 30 years is the courage to stand up for what it believes, which is right, wrong, or otherwise. And I don't just mean pastors in the CRC. I mean decisions on an institutional level, decisions on a collegiate level. What we stand up for needs to be clearly named and say, if you do not abide by these standards, then we cannot covenant with one another according to those standards with which they require. When we decided that we could be somewhat relative on some things, we instituted an entire culture of you can be somewhat relative on everything. So that's a very good way to put it, is it's the slippery slope. Women in office was not the issue that started it, but it was a slow build. And here we are now to the point where 30% of the denomination, according to the vote, thinks that it's acceptable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's not just like the slippery slope, like fallacy. It's saying that there was a fundamental error somewhere that has caused us to keep going down this road. And that happened before women in office. The issue was there. I think women in office and how we handled that was just, again, another symptom of this error that we've been holding on to. And And
That's
really
right.
what I find interesting about it is, as you were talking, I was thinking it is really this individualism
Mhm.
of our culture that has really slipped in, where we're like, well, we don't want to speak on this as a denomination or as a body. We don't want to do that. We want to give everybody their kind of individual whatever, which I think is funny, because we're trying to say, no, there's this communal aspect to being in a denomination with one another, where we hold these things together.
Yeah.
And we believe things together, and we don't, it's not about everybody kind of just believing whatever they want and we're just going to pool our money and resources together.
You know,
It's a communal thing.
If we're going to do that, if we can all just kind of believe whatever they want and, everything is relatively fine, we just have to have this core thing called the Bible that we somewhat vaguely almost sort of have to agree on, then we shouldn't be in a denomination at all. Because
That's right.
if we cannot join together on the three forms of unity, if we can't even hold on to those basic truths, what else can't we agree to? Right? Those are the Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, the word itself and the three forms of unity are on what we rest our faith.
Yeah.
And if we're disagreeing about those already, everything else is just going to fall apart.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we can't agree on the basics, we're for sure not going to agree on the minutia.
Yeah, I want to connect a couple of things that we've talked about now, because I think this is a really important conversation for us to have, and I think you have a unique perspective on this. Because, so on the one hand, we've been talking how important it is for us to stand firm on God's word, stand firm on our confessions, take stances, say, this is what I believe, this is what I don't believe. And yet, one of the accusations that it came up on the synod floor, and it's come up since then, is, well, if we do that, we're going to hinder our witness in the world. And so I'm talking to you as someone who served as an outreach pastor and who's done outreach among some of the most, if you want to use the buzzwords, marginalized people in the country, like the homeless and all of that, and inner city stuff. And so you've ministered there. Have you experienced that taking firm stances on God's word and holding firm to the confessions, that's hindered your witness in any way?
No, not at all. And that's what drives me absolutely crazy, is the people are saying, well, you're hindering our witness. I struggle to rationalize that, because that leaves me thinking, well, what kind of witness were you being in the first place? My reality is very simple. There are a lot of people that I minister to and have ministered to throughout the years that have drug problems, that have alcohol problems, that are homeless. There are people who are struggling with their own sexuality, whether that be homosexuality or whether that be, cheating on their spouse, whatever, porn addiction, doesn't matter. I've got all sorts of people that I've ministered to. And right after we made the decision in 2022 to affirm the current understanding, the traditional understanding of the Heidelberg question and what that meant, right after we affirmed the HSR, I held a meeting with my congregation, many of which never grew up in the CRC, many of which aren't churched. And I said, here's what the HSR did. Here's what this decision did. Here's how it impacts us. And here's what we're going to do moving forward. And what I told them was basically, this is where we stand. This is where we're going to stand. This is the work we're going to do. And on a macro level, it changes how we interact with our community in terms of there are some people who disagree with our perspective, but on a micro level, we're still doing our ministry out of love for Jesus Christ. And there are people in my congregation who struggle with their sexuality, and none of them have left because of my stance or our church's stance of affirming the HSR. If anything, they said, thanks for the clarity, because they know full well that the HSR doesn't say, hey, if you're gay, get out. What it is saying, this is what we believe. We will love you and walk with you for the purpose of repentance and restoration, just like someone who's struggling with alcoholism or drug abuse.
Yeah.
We're not booting people out of our churches because of their sexuality. At least I'm not. I'm saying, hey, if you're struggling, come on in, because we're all struggling with sin. What we're saying is that this is what we believe. And if you openly adopt that lifestyle and say, I don't need to repent of it, no, you shouldn't hold office. No, you shouldn't be teaching kids. why is any of this hard? It hasn't changed at all any way of which I do ministry. If anything, it's actually made people come to church because there are a few churches in our area that are struggling, and they go, we want to be where you're at because at least we know where you stand. Yep.
100%. Yeah. And that's, there's been this dialogue coming out of this past synod, because a lot of people spoke from the floor. I was kind of taking under the banner myself, and then I rewatched some of it and realized a lot of people talked about clarity, right? So I wasn't the only one talking about clarity. A whole bunch of people were talking about clarity. And then somebody stood up and said, I don't think people struggling with this are looking for clarity. They're looking for belonging. And then there's been all of this kind of fallout from some of the progressives saying that we were worshiping the idol of clarity, right? So that's a pretty strong accusation, really, that we were worshiping the idol of clarity. And what I've found is very different from that. It's very similar to your experience, where clarity and belonging are not pitted against one another at all.
No, not at all.
And so we can have clarity, and that clarity actually helps you feel like you belong because you know where you're at. And all of the muddiness leaves everybody kind of walking on their tiptoes, not quite knowing where someone stands. They're not free to speak. But when you just have clarity on, here's where I stand. I love you. I care for you. Let's work through this, but we're not going to embrace this. When we have that kind of clarity, now we can actually be in relationship with one another.
Exactly right.
Yeah, I do think part of the problem is that clarity. It does help you know where you're at, but I do think it also helps our adversaries know where they're not. I think that was a big part of this, is they finally realized, oh, wow, we really are kind of disenfranchised from the other 75%, aren't we? I think that was in play too.
Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah. No,
I was just going to say that that you're exactly right. That's where some of the I'm almost certain that's where some of the vitriol that came out of the fallout of Synod 2022. It was a reaction to, wait, this isn't the denomination I thought I was a part of.
Right.
When all that happened was there was just clarity on what we've always believed, right? And that's even where some of the false accusations are being labeled, that it was like a coup, and it was like this this working behind the scenes kind of a thing to make it happen at Synod. And anytime people start doing conspiracy theories, it's when something happens that happens completely outside their worldview or the way they see things, and they go, there's no way that can be real. So there must have been some dark doings there. And so the clarity of 2022, I think, helped people see, oh, no, this is who we are as a denomination.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you have a system in which, again, like we talked about previously, for the last 25 years, relativism just was allowed to spread, right? And all of a sudden, when push came to shove, and finally there was no other recourse than to say, we've gone this far, we won't go any farther. And you plant your flag and say, no, it's done. All of a sudden, it shook up their entire worldview. Yeah. Because what was allowed isn't allowed anymore. Well, it never was allowed. It's just that no one had been bold enough to say it.
Yeah, that's right.
And that is ultimately one of my fundamental challenges with the Christian Reformed Church as a denomination right now. I wish that there was more people willing to stand up, like you guys, who are willing to stand up and say, hey, what's wrong is what's wrong. Let's just be bold about it and be truthful about it, because we didn't write this book that we follow. We're just trying to follow it as best we can.
Yeah.
And I didn't write those passages in Leviticus. I didn't write any of Paul's letters. I didn't write the 5,000 years of tradition that speaks to healthy sexuality. I didn't write that. The good Lord Almighty did through prophets and his apostles. So if that's all true, it didn't just change now. And so if we really want to do away with this, what I refer to as humanistic relativism that has encroached upon the Christian Reformed denomination, We need some people to stand up and be bold and go, we're not being relativist at all. This is what's true and what has been true and will continue to be true.
Yeah, I've been thinking lately, and I haven't said it fully because I wasn't sure if it was a fair accusation, but I've talked to a few other people who are probably more nuanced in their thinking, and they agreed with me. So I want to throw this out here, and we'll see if I get pushed back, see what you think. But one of the reasons I think the CRC has had such a difficult time taking a stance on anything, or really is because of a faulty understanding of Kuyperianism.
Yeah.
And this desire to engage in the culture, right? So I would call myself Kuyperian. Mm-hmm. But so I've seen this through our denomination. We want to be engaging in the culture. We want to be speaking into issues. We want to be in academia. We want to be in all of these things. But we also want to be respectable in all of these places.
Yep.
And so we get up into academia, and so we see some of these professors that have been like rock solid conservatives, like really solid. And all of a sudden the academic tides change, and we see them just kind of, they sway with the tide. Mm-hmm. And why is that? I think it's because like you're going to be blackballed if you don't swing with the tides, right? And so you start to kind of justify in your own mind, well, if I move with this, then I can preach the gospel into that area too, right? And if I take a strong stance on this, I'm going to be pushed off to the side, and then I'm going to lose an opportunity to share the gospel or to speak the kingdom of God into this area, right? And so I'm going to fudge a little bit here just so I can keep my influence and keep my whatever. And if we just kind of keep everything foggy and fuzzy, then we can have official stances that are orthodox, but we can kind of wade over here and still be respectable in academic circles. But when there's clarity, you lose that. And it's kind of the funny thing for me, because like I'm just a country farm boy. I'm like a nobody pastor out in rural Wisconsin. And, you know, Jesse, you're in rural Iowa, you know, there's nothing there. And Willie's in rural Minnesota. Yep. And we're like, I've never been respectable.
Yeah.
So we're not worried about that.
So let's just tell it like it is, right? Like, let's just say what it is and stand on this. Yeah. And I think that's a really good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with you. I think that this idea of Kuyperianism has been nuanced to death, to the point that what was originally intended by Kuyper as a way in which to engage culture from the perspective of the gospel has now been co-opted by culture, so that instead of it's us going out into the culture, culture is now coming into us.
That's all we have for this week. Stay tuned next week for part 2 of our conversation with Jesse Walhof. But until then, don't forget this is Christ Church, and he bought it with his blood. And we've been warned that wolves will come in trying to destroy the flock. So keep a close watch on your life and on your doctrine. Preach the word in season and out of season. And keep fighting the good fight in this messy Reformation.